Hello and welcome to Melee's Turnwheel, the series that takes a retroactive look at the Fire Emblem series chapter by chapter. I'm your host, I'm a Melee Kirby, and today we're taking it back to chapters 29, 28 Eliwood, 30 Hector, 31, and 31X of Fire Emblem, the Blazing Blade. Now, that was kind of a weird sequence of chapters there, and I'll be sure to talk about that, right away as soon as we get into the meat and potatoes of the episode. But to start off with, I wanted to just quickly say, last episode's question: what do you prefer between Jeremy and Kenneth version of Pale Flower of Darkness? Did not get any responses to that. Once again, not actually too surprised by that because it was a pretty it was kind of a filler question. I'm just gonna be completely honest. So I'm not bothered by it at all. I do hope that I get some responses to this next question though. So if you're listening, make sure you go and respond to at I'm a Melee Kirby at Twitter, because I'd like some stuff to chew on for this next question. What is your favorite or least favorite, if you prefer, guidance chapter in Fire Emblem: The Binding Blade? The Blazing Blade, rather. You could say Binding Blade too if you want, although I already did that one. We're gonna be doing another guidance chapter in the last episode. There is a guidance chapter right before Endgame, so if anyone really hates 32X, mention that and say like, oh, I guess you'll be talking about it next episode or whatever. But yeah, there's some good guidance chapters in here. I really like 17X. I really like I think 13X can be fun depending on the circumstances. Let's see what else. I like 31X. I think that's a fun one. I think it's a fun concept for a map. Is that it? Are those the only good ones? I shouldn't be getting too much into this question. There are definitely some ones that I'm gonna want to talk about. Some ones that are both good and really obnoxious. But yeah, go ahead and let me know what your favorite or least favorite guidance chapter in Fire Emblem: The Binding Blade is. Whichever you think is more interesting to talk about. Whatever you prefer. I'm a Melee Kirby on Twitter, X, whatever. Or you can email me, turnwheelpodcast@gmail.com, and I will read your responses. Okay, so yes, weird sequence of chapters this episode. So essentially, today we're going to be talking about Cog of Destiny, I believe is what we started with, and then into the two chapters of the game where you get a holy weapon. One of them is Eliwood mode exclusive, and the other one is Hector mode exclusive. This right here is the reason why we had to do so much of the game in Eliwood mode, which was never difficult. It was extremely easy actually. And it wasn't even like that. I didn't hate it. It was like fine. It like barely took a few minutes for most maps. I did actually lose a couple of times, just because I was just so on autopilot for most of those maps that every once in a while I would just be dumb and put a flyer in range of an archer, which normally doesn't actually matter. The only reason that matters for me is because I'm playing on the ×3 effectiveness patch, which if you're playing an English localized version of the game, that wouldn't affect you. The only way you'd get that experience authentically is if you were playing a Japanese copy of the game. So for the most part, even that's not really a concern. But yeah, so I did decide after doing this chapter 28 Eliwood mode, that I did not do an Eliwood playthrough for any of the other chapters this episode, nor do I plan to continue into the next episode. Because it was just kind of tedious. I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna do when we get to 3 houses, because 3 houses, my plan was to do 4 playthroughs of every chapter, and talk about each chapter. To counterbalance that, I would only be doing. I'm obviously getting way ahead of myself, but I do think about this sometimes because I'm very excited to get to 3 houses. It's one of my favorite games in the series. I would probably only do 1 chapter per episode, and I would talk about the different perspectives on that from each of the 3 houses, and then a 4th one where I eventually branch off into the Silver Snow. But if 2 playthroughs of every map one of which was extremely easy most of the time, is doing me in this bad, then I don't know what I'm going to do when we get to 3 houses. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, which is not going to be for a very, 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 very long time, probably. Okay, but yes, so no more Eliwood modes, so don't expect any more updates from the Eliwood mode side of this playthrough, other than, I'll talk about, a couple of things here and there. And I will also be talking about, like, certain things that are exclusive to the Eliwood version of the script. I might gloss over some stuff if I miss it, or I just don't find it to be that interesting. It is a little bit of a shame because there are very distinct gameplay changes between Eliwood and Hector mode a lot of the time, which we're going to talk about. Cog of Destiny actually has quite a few notable ones, at least between, Hector mode and Eliwood mode, I believe. But yes, so from now on, chapters 31, 31X, and then the rest of the game will be on Hector hard mode only. I think that's everything out of the way. So let's go ahead and get into our chapters for the episode, starting with chapter 29, Cog of Destiny. Alright, so, I mean, I've mentioned this time and time again. I've brought it up over and over and over and over as a chapter that I'm very much not looking forward to. If you have ever played the game, especially on Hector hard mode, you know why. It is a notoriously really annoying chapter. One of the only chapters in the game, even on Hector hard mode, that I would describe as challenging. But it's not really challenging in a fun or interesting way for the most part. It's mostly just interesting because it throws a lot of bullshit at you, and you kind of have to figure out how to deal with it. And you're gonna end up getting screwed and having to reset a bunch. It's hard to, it's your mileage may vary on what you consider to be fun and interesting ways to make a map challenging. And there are some ways in which I like Cog of Destiny's approach to challenge, but just not very many. So I guess we'll get the Eliwood version out of the way first, because there are a couple of differences there. I mean, first of all, story wise, I did go to Linus version of Four Fanged Offense in the Eliwood mode playthrough, which does have an impact here. So whichever brother in your playthrough did not die in Four Fanged Offense. So for my Eliwood playthrough, that was Lloyd that did not die, and then for the Hector mode playthrough, it was Linus that did not die. They are the boss of this chapter, and so that doesn't make any sense story wise. You're gonna hear me say that a lot. There's a lot of shit in this stretch of chapters, especially that really brought down my opinion of the story. Not that I didn't already know about it, but just like, there's some cool stuff set up at the beginning, and then the middle isn't like that bad. But here is where it really just all goes off the fucking rails. So from what we hear in, I believe it's Pale Flower of Darkness, whichever brother is still alive just completely goes off the map after Four Fanged Offense. And the fact that they did not check in or report, like, I understand, I explained this last time. I understand that the reason that they did this is because the script writers did not want to have to adjust the few scenes, I think maybe even just one scene where this comes up, depending on what version of Four Fanged Offense you did. It seems like it would be a relatively easy thing to do, but what do I know? I'm not a game programmer. But that you have to understand that even if that is the out-of-universe reason, the in-universe implication of that is that, let's take the Eliwood mode playthrough, for example. I fought Linus. That means, it's even more ridiculous with if Lloyd is the one that doesn't die. So this is an even better example to highlight than it would be for Linus. So let's say you kill Linus you don't kill Linus. You beat Linus in Four Fanged Offense. He dies. He gets killed by Limstella. And that means Lloyd decided to not report back on what happened, made no effort to get in contact with his dad, and seemingly just went completely off the grid, had enough contact with the Black Fang to just have an entire fucking platoon of, dozens upon dozens and dozens of soldiers, but made no effort to contact his dad, which could have helped him avoid dying. Whichever brother survives here does not make any comment on the fact that their dad is now dead. They might not even know. So, for whatever reason, one of the fucking guys just doesn't, just goes completely out of the story for like 6 chapters, and the game just kind of expects you to roll with that. Like, why are they still here? Like, what, this was, like, there could have been a scene where they find out about Brendan dying, and that could have, like, driven them, especially for Lloyd. I do think that they could have used a little bit more to explain why they've gone fully off the deep end. Linus is just already a little crazy. I mean, his nickname is the Mad Dog. And I don't remember what line. I think or Lloyd's. I think it's the Silver Wolf. Maybe, I'm not sure. But Mad Dog is Linus's, and so he's already a little bit cuckoo. So he's a little bit more believable. However, Lloyd is presented as pretty calm and collected, and does not, is the more rational of the two, the more reasonable of the two. So that is another issue with the story of this chapter, is that it doesn't make a lot of sense, in my opinion, for Lloyd to, be this hell-bent on revenge that he doesn't even have very much evidence for. It doesn't make sense for him to have completely disconnected from Brendan. And it feels like you could have solved both of these issues in one go. Have it so that Lloyd is still involved. He gets sent away on some bullshit mission by Sonia, which frees up the opportunity for her to kill Brendan. He finds out about it at the end of Night of Farewells. And that, combined with Linus's death, drives him further off the deep end. And you can have the same thing for Linus, the other way around. It just, it seems like such an easy fix, like I don't get why they did it. It could have improved the story, because it's just like, it's really noticeable, like how little sense this makes, in my opinion. Maybe you're playing this game for the first time, you don't give a shit. That's fine. I don't think I gave a shit when I played this game for the first time. Although, to be fair, I played this game for the first time when I was like 13. No, I was like 14 probably. So I don't know. Maybe I just didn't think about it. I'm not sure. Anyway, only one other issue that I had with the story of this chapter is that there's a part at the beginning where Nino says, like, no, like, I don't want to fight Lloyd or Linus. If I could just talk to them, if I could just go up and have a conversation with them, I'm sure we don't have to fight. Which really, really, really feels like, really, really, really feels like it's setting up for some sort of conversation, where you can, I mean, probably not recruit Lloyd or Linus. I don't think most people would expect for that to happen. But there's a history in the series, of you being able to talk to bosses with your characters, and they will either like stop fighting you, or there'll be some event that happens. There's nothing that happens with Nino. I mean, she has a conversation with them, and for both of them, from what I remember, it's pretty good. I think. Let me take a look, actually, because I want to jog my memory on them. Okay, I did just go and jog my memory, and I'm glad that I did, because I missed something. I missed a pretty important detail. So it's a little bit different depending on whether the boss is Linus or Lloyd. If the boss is Linus, there is no conversation that you can. There's a battle conversation is the only thing, and it's pretty short. It's pretty brutal, actually. He just says, "I'm gonna kill anybody that helped with killing my brother, and that includes you," which is awful, awful, awful. And then there's no other impact of it besides that. However, if Lloyd is the boss, you can have a conversation with Nino. You can walk up to him and talk to him, kind of like Gale with Milady in FE6, and he still will not. Nothing significant will happen for the most part. The conversation's a little bit better. Still not great in my opinion, but it's a little bit better. And then the major thing is that he will not initiate combat with Nino. he can still retaliate against her, which unless you really grinded her up in the previous chapter, she's not going to stand up very well to him. So it's not like a viable. This could be a fun way if he just didn't counterattack her. This could be like a fun way to like boss abuse, which is awful given the story context, right? Like the talk about dissonance, right? But that is nice that they included that. But the way that it's presented at the beginning really feels like you're gonna get something more significant out of it. Maybe even like an item or some sort of like special clear condition. I don't know. Like it's hard to I'm trying to think of a good example. I know Olwen and Reinhardt have one of these, and that could be kind of cool, right? Like I'm thinking about this right now. Like if hold on, let me cook for a second, okay? If Nino could end the map by talking to Linus or Lloyd, if that was just like an alternative clear condition, then not only would that make this map significantly better just in a vacuum, because as it stands, it's a route map with a million, billion, trillion reinforcements. So, assuming that you're not like paying attention to the reinforcement zones, there's so many enemies that can attack you. And it's a route map. It's not even a seize, it's a route map. So you have to kill all of them. If you could bypass that by talking with Nino, not only would that make the map more fun, because you could find like alternate ways. This is the chapter even where you get the warp staff, so you could include that in some capacity. And it would also give you more incentive to train Nino. I mean, in practice, it would probably just devolve into you like rescuing her with Marcus, and warping him or something like that. Most people probably still wouldn't train Nino as a method of making the map easier, but it would be an option. It would make training Nino like an actually viable decision, which I think would be super interesting. But they don't. They decide not to go that route, which is a shame. I think that would have been super cool. Would have made me actually think this is a good map, possibly. Probably still not great because there would still be some issues with that approach for what it's worth. But yeah, I just thought that was weird. I don't know why they included I don't know why they included this bit from Nino if all it was going to amount to was like a unique conversation that doesn't actually accomplish anything like mechanically. It's just kind of like a nice moment between these two. And it's not worth bringing Nino to this map over, especially in Hector hard mode, I can tell you that much. Okay, let's get into the map now, and let me start off by addressing something that I should have said a long time ago, because it's been relevant like multiple times into the game up to this point, but it's especially relevant here. I finally remembered to talk about it, and I think part of that is because in this episode, I think almost every single map falls into this category. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's most of them. There are maps in this game that are clear visual references to maps from FE6, to the point where some maps are just maps from FE6 that they have just like moved the camera down to another section, like if they just move. Like this one, for example, if you take chapter 21 of Binding Blade, the one where you fight Murdoch, because that takes place at the Shrine of Seals, if you just move the camera down and to the right to reveal like what's beyond the bottom of that map in FE6, then that's kind of what this map is. You can see the top of this map lines up pretty well with the bottom of FE6 chapter 21. I don't know if it's 1-to-1. If it's not, you can easily explain that by just saying that it was 20 years have passed, so things can change. But it is pretty similar. I'm trying to think. I know there have been other examples of this. Hold on, let me just look up a list of chapters. Oh yes, there's another one where it comes up. I think it might be more than just one, but FE6 chapter 2, the one where you recruit Shanna and Deke and Lot and Wade, is it is meant to be chapter chapter 23 Lloyd version. Four Fanged Offense Lloyd version is supposed to be an homage to that. You can even see like on on that map on Four Fanged Offense, there are those two forts where at least in the fast strat, in the better strat, frankly, of Four Fanged Offense Lloyd version, you lure Lloyd down to those forts and use those forts to take advantage of them to kill Lloyd. In FE, those are the same forts that in FE6 Deke and co spawn right next to you, and you can use those forts to kind of like fight off enemies for a while. That's cool. I really like that, and that applies to most chapters in this game, or in most chapters in this episode, I should say. So I'll mention that a couple of times when it comes up. I think I don't think there's another instance of it for the rest of the game. I think because the rest of the game takes place on the Dragon's Gate, which is not an area that's ever in FE6, so it wouldn't make any sense for it to be there, but whatever. Okay, so as I already mentioned, this is a route map, and it is a route map with a lot of enemies. Let me see, do I have Hector hard mode? 45 initial enemies on the beginning of the map, and then on Hector hard mode, 73 reinforcements. 74 if you count Vida. However, Vida is a recruitable character who we're going to talk about, so we can just say 73 potential reinforcements to spawn in during this map. That is nothing, by the way, compared to what we're going to get in Victory or Death. However, at the very least, Victory or Death is not a route map, so that it has that going for it at least. Jesus Christ, sorry, I just looked up the reinforcement numbers for Victory or Death, and man, I cannot wait to talk about that one. So the way reinforcements are distributed in this map is that there are reinforcement zones. And I do like maps that tend to have reinforcement zones, in the sense that I like that I can avoid the reinforcement zones and bypass the entire gimmick of the map. I think there's an interesting argument to be made about reinforcement zones. And I feel I'm gonna make this. I'm gonna talk about a similar argument for some notoriously bad maps in FE9 and FE10, where it's a question of, does knowing like details about a map that are not immediately present or not immediately presented to you, you have to like look it up on like a guide or a wiki or whatever the fuck. If knowledge of those elements makes a map more fun than it would be otherwise, how do you take that into consideration? And I think the answer is different in this chapter compared to those Tellius chapters that I'm going to talk about, obviously, when we get to Tellius. In the case of the reinforcement zones, I do think that they make the maps more tolerable. Or, well, in this case, it's just Battle Before Dawn. Or, not, Jesus, I can't talk. In this case, just Cog of Destiny. I think there are reinforcement zones for Victory or Death as well that I'm going to be taking advantage of. But it also applies to, like, FE6 Chapter 21, which is, like, really, really obnoxious if you don't know about the reinforcement zones. You have to go out of your way to avoid the reinforcement zones. Or you're just going to have a bad time, quite frankly. For me, I don't necessarily think that it's wrong to say, okay, well, I have WAD. You know, most people this day and age are going to have access to WAD. And I do want to play these games in such a way where, you know, it somewhat emulates the experience of a person playing them, on actual hardware. The main way that I'm doing this is that I have firmly rejected using save states at all ever. For this podcast, that is. I use safe states liberally when I'm playing casually, because I'm bad at Fire Emblem. But I do want to stick with the no save states rule. However, in a lot of other areas, I'm a little bit more loosey-goosey about it, because like the fact that you're on hardware does not mean that you can't just look up, the reinforcement zones on WAD. That's how I feel. It's not like an actual adjustment that you are making to the game. It's just information that is out there, and you can like access it if you want to. The platform you are playing it on does not make any difference. However, using the reinforcement zones in this way, and in the way you use them in FE6 Chapter 21, feels less like taking advantage of information to make the map more fun and more interesting, and more like just choosing to disengage with an element of the map that was clearly intended. You were clearly not meant to know where these reinforcement zones are. You're clearly meant to just stumble into them and hope things work out. And unlike in the instance of those Tellius maps that I mentioned earlier, that I'm gonna be talking about at a later time, I don't feel like having that information and utilizing it to your advantage actually makes the map more engaging. It just feels like I'm cheating. You know what I mean? It feels like I'm cheating the game and therefore myself by avoiding the reinforcement zones. Am I gonna do it anyway? I mean, fucking obviously, because this map would be insufferable. And fucking Victory or Death even more so. Chapter 21 FE6 even more so. So the way the reinforcement zones are laid out, it's basically impossible. It technically is possible, although it would be probably more trouble than it's worth to do this. You can't avoid going into at least one of them. And what I personally like to do is I prefer to go into the middle one. I just go straight up. I bring my entire army straight up through the mountain pass, which is more interesting to me for a couple reasons. First of all, it's a good choke point. Second of all, it's pretty easy. Like, the enemies that spawn are just monks who are extremely weak, as opposed to, I think, the western reinforcement zone spawns I think some fucking I think they're dark mages. And then I think the right one spawns mages and sages. So those are a little bit more difficult to deal with. One of them spawns valkyries, and trust me, we're going to get to the fucking valkyries. It is worth mentioning, by the way, that Eliwood mode's unit layout are completely different. Whereas in Hector mode, it's almost exclusively magic units, magic enemies, which is part of what makes it so difficult. There are physical enemies in the Eliwood mode version of the map, which are significantly easier to deal with. I said we're going to get to the Valkyries. We might as well just get to the Valkyries right now. So several of the enemies on this map are extremely threatening. Notoriously, this chapter has a handful of Valkyries, which are promoted troubadours. They are mounted units that can wield staves, and they can wield anima magic. And they are, for no goddamn reason, extremely cracked. They are easily the fastest enemies that we fought in the game up to this point. Probably the fastest for the entire game for the most part, except for maybe a couple of bosses. Even my absolute fastest units were not doubling them. Some of the ones that rolled low on speed, theoretically, could be doubled by Florina. But Florina, because my Florina is like kind of low speed. She's still extremely fast, but for a Florina of her level, I think she's a little bit speed screwed. But because she's weighed down by the weapons I'm having her use, which is almost every weapon that's not a stun lance, I don't think she actually doubled any of them. Maybe a couple. Maybe some of the ones that were wielding. Yeah, you know what? She doubled the ones that were wielding Elfire tomes. I remember that. But Florina was my absolute fastest unit. No one on my army even came close. So the fact that she wasn't doubling them very often, should tell you that they're quite fast. They can double most of your guys. They do no shortage of damage because they do magic. Most guys have bad res. If you are dumb enough, thankfully it's never happened to me. I certainly am not above making this kind of mistake. I avoided it this time. But if you're dumb enough to leave Hector in the range of one of them, he almost certainly gets one rounded. Because his res is so bad, his speed is middling, and even like much faster characters are getting doubled by these guys. It's pretty bad. Now, thankfully, you can do a good amount of damage to them with your physical guys. Brave weapons are really helpful here. Any guys that you have with high res, but like high physical, like high like good res, or decent res, and high strength, that use physical based attacks. Barrier staves will be your friend here. I do sort of like having to plan around the Valkyries. The main issue that I have is their status staves. The status staves, there's a few, not just the Valkyries have them. I think there's a couple druids that have them. There's like 3 berserk staves and like 4 sleep staves or some shit. It's crazy. And those are really obnoxious. I got on my successful attempt at the map. I think it took me a few tries. But on my successful attempt, I dodged a lot of really clutch ones. I think I would have been fine otherwise. I think I would have been fine even if I didn't dodge them. Like I had planned, I had prepared. I was a little bit underprepared because somehow, I don't know how this happened, but I ended up with only one restore staff, and it was low on uses, so I had to hammer that in the middle of the fucking fight. And then, I ended up not having to use it too often after that because I got some of those clutch dodges. I think I would have been fine, but it certainly helps. I don't think I dodged any that were critical for me to dodge, but I think that it helped free up my units for other things like healing and attacking. So overall, that was tremendously helpful. I got a lot of crits. Several of them didn't matter, but some of them actually did matter a fair bit. At the very least, making the map shorter and less tedious, if nothing else. Although I think a few of them might have actually, significantly saved my bacon. But yeah, there's just a lot of enemies. A lot of them are very strong. It's a route map, so you do have to engage with all of them. You can't just bypass them. It's a recipe for frustration. But I will say, more so than in previous playthroughs of the game, I enjoyed this map as a challenge to be overcome. I think this is the closest that I've felt in this game, at least, to feeling the same way that Soup did. If you remember Soup, a guest I had on my my FE6 episodes, talked about Arcadia in the same way. He was like, it's a cool benchmark map that makes you feel like you've really overcome something. It's a goal to work towards. It's a goal to plan around, and it makes you feel accomplished when you get through it. That is kind of how I felt about Cog of Destiny by the end here. I planned, I prepared, and I succeeded, and it was cool. And it didn't feel like I was just struggling to get by. And then it didn't feel like I just got lucky either. It feels like I really it put my strategic skills to the test, and I came out victorious, and that was fun. I mean, I don't know if I would say this map is harder than Arcadia. I definitely don't think it is. Although I will say Arcadia is harder in ways that I find more frustrating personally. But whatever. You get my point. I felt a little bit more accomplished. Enough so where I think this has gone completely out of the running as my least favorite map in the game. There's a few contenders for that. I thought this was going to be one of them. It's still pretty low for me, but I enjoyed it on this playthrough enough where I don't think I'm going to go that far with it. So one of the villages, I mean, it's the only village. There's a village on the bottom left corner of the map, and it's going to get attacked by bandits if you don't hurry. That might encourage you to go right through that reinforcement zone on the left. That's going to spawn a bunch of dark mages. Don't do it. Pick a flyer, send them around, and in my case, Florina was enough to handle that whole area, no problem. If you go there, Murdoch is actually in that village, and he knows what you did. He appreciates your help for Zephiel. He keeps it on the DL, but he heavily implies like, hey, I know what's up. Take this warp staff. So now we have a warp staff, and that's great. The warp staff is pretty cool. I don't know how much I'm actually going to use it. I feel like, obviously if you're LTCing this game or you're speedrunning, like this may sound dumb, like maybe I'm a baby Fire Emblem player. I actually feel like this is maybe one of the least useful games in terms of its, like, this is like one of the least useful instances of the warp staff. There we go. I was trying to figure out how the fuck to phrase that. Because like I don't feel like it's that helpful in any of the rest of the maps in this episode. It can probably come in handy in Victory or Death, especially bypassing some reinforcement zones possibly. And then after that, it's basically endgame. There is a guidance chapter where it's actually really funny. There's a guidance chapter where you can warp straight to the middle. But if you do that, the game is able to recognize that you've cheated and got past the door without opening it, because there's like a door, and the central room has a door that you need to open to get in, and it spawns in a bunch of really hard enemies. It's not actually that big of a deal. You can still get by no problem by doing that, but it's a fun, maybe one of the only times in the entire series that the game has ever like acknowledged that the warp staff might be used and like planned around that, because I feel like the game is like cripplingly unprepared for warp in most instances, like most other games, that is. But yeah, no, it's not like FE8, the warp staff is really useful. The DS games are incredibly broken in half by the warp staff. Thracia doesn't even bear mentioning. So yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like the warp staff is actually that great in this one. I'm not even sure if I'm going to use it, but we'll see. Maybe I'll use it to get past. No, I can't warp skip. So I wouldn't use it for 31X anyway. It's been so long since I've had to worry about warp skipping because compared to FE6, not only do you get this so much. I mean, that's the thing, right? I just haven't had it in this game up to this point. It's been like a full year since the last time I've had to think about warp skipping. So that's going to be fun. We have to think about that more in FE8 because there's a couple maps that are very tempting to warp skip. I'm not allowed to do that, so I won't. All right, and then let's talk about Lloyd and Linus. Both of them are not that strong. They have light brands, both of them, for some reason. I don't know why Linus does. Lloyd, that kind of makes sense because he's a sword master. There's no other ranged weapon you could really give him. I mean, that's why he had one in Four-Fanged Offense. But you could absolutely give Linus a tomahawk. In fact, he had a tomahawk in his version of Four-Fanged Offense, I think. So I don't know why they didn't just do that again. It would have made him a lot more threatening, but I'm not complaining because it's very easy. If you have any units with high res, which if you've been fighting all the Valkyries up to this point, you should have units with high res. They're really easy to just actually no, it's not. It doesn't bounce off your res, does it? In this game, I think it's just a flat 10 damage. So yeah, that doesn't matter. But still, 20 damage maximum on any of your guys is nothing at this point in the game. 20 damage is peanuts. Most of your guys are rocking like your moderately to significantly bulky guys are rocking anywhere from like mid 30s to mid 40s for health. Some of your super bulky guys like Hawkeye might even have more than that. So yeah, I don't really know what the point of the light brands were. They're a little bit weak. We will not need to worry about this in the end game in Endgame where they show up as morphs. Spoilers, I guess. Lloyd and Linus being too weak is not a problem that we're gonna have to worry about in that map. So look forward to that. But okay, that's pretty much it for this map. There is one other significant thing. I have it towards the end of my notes here for some reason. Actually, I know what the reason is. It's because in Eliwood mode, which is the one I did first, I recruited Vida at the very, very end. So I stuck her right at the end of my notes, even though in Hector mode, I recruited her a fair bit earlier because there was still like a good chunk of the map left for me to deal with after that. So Vida is recruitable. She shows up with some Pegasi, with some Wyvern Knights at the bottom of the map, which is unfortunate if you don't know how to recruit her or you don't know that she's coming, because what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to recruit her with your main lord. The problem is that you might want your main lord to be up doing some fighting. On Hector mode, that's probably less of an issue because Hector does not fare well against most enemies. Pretty much every single enemy in this map is going to beat the dog shit out of Hector. But Eliwood, if you're playing on Eliwood mode, is like, especially if you're playing on Eliwood mode, you might have Eliwood up on the front lines, especially knowing that he's about to promote. I don't know, it's possible. But either way, you recruit Vida by talking to her with your main lord. And she is a pre-promoted Wyvern Lord, and she's quite good. She is the latest in a series of extremely broken pre-promotes, like I was saying. I don't think she's like super broken, especially at this point. There's only a few chapters left anyway, so I think she's appropriately strong for when you get her. If she was any weaker, then she probably would just be unusable because she wouldn't be strong enough to kill enemies, and you don't have a lot of time to get her up to speed. So I think she's very appropriately strong for when you get her, in contrast to like Hawkeye and Pent, who are like probably way, way, way too strong for the point in the game where you get them. I feel like Vida is pretty reasonable. I mean, she's a good pre-promote, but I wouldn't say she's any better than like some other like good pre-promotes, like, I don't know, who are some good pre-promotes in other Fire Emblem games. Like FE9 Har is a good example. FE10 Har is a different story, but FE9 Har I would say is like pretty solid, but not like overpowered or anything. Just like good solid filler, right? Like if you need another warm body on your team, which you might, because this chapter probably killed like 6 of your guys. So yeah, Vida is a good contender to fill that. I did end up deploying her for several more chapters. I deployed her in oh, you know what? It was just Sands of Time, I guess. Yeah. So I deployed her in Sands of Time, and she's quite good there. Probably gonna deploy her in Victory or Death. Who can say though? Not sure. Okay, I think that about wraps up everything I wanted to say for this map. After the map is over, we've officially made it to the Shrine of Seals, as Athos instructed us to do several chapters ago. Athos shows back up here, and there's a comment here that I don't. This isn't really a criticism. I just think it's kind of funny. Where Athos like teleports in, and he's like, well. I think Hector or Eliwood, somebody's like, if you could just do that, then why didn't you just send us here? And he's like, no, but you needed to prove yourself. You needed to show that, actually getting here wasn't actually the problem. You needed to work your way up to show that you're worthy of what we're about to do next. Athos wants to break the seals on the holy weapons, the legendary weapons, the dragon-slaying weapons that we saw in FE6. They're here in this game again. We only get to use a couple of them this time. But in order to do that, they needed to go to the Shrine of Seals. There's a person here named Bramimond, who is described as being not having any identity of their own. I actually really, really like Bramimond. I think they're really interesting. Bramimond was one of the 8 legendary heroes alongside Athos, Roland, etc. And they're what they used to be is not really elaborated on. I would love, incidentally, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I would love some sort of fan hack that covers the events of the Scouring the first time, and has like a bunch of characters, like has the eight heroes as playable characters. I think that would be so cool. So Bramimond is here, and Bramimond is supposedly in charge of protecting the seal on the weapons. They realized after the Scouring that the weapons were too powerful, so they decided to seal them away and put Bramimond, I guess, in charge of maintaining the seals. Bramimond is obviously, the Scouring was 1,000 years ago, give or take, and so that means Bramimond is at least as old as Athos, possibly older, and their whole thing is that they don't have any personality or identity of their own. It's implied, maybe it's outright stated, I don't remember, that the dark magic that they use, time and time again, we're shown how dark magic can corrupt, how it can destroy, and how it can twist and deform a person's mind. Bramimond seems to be mostly they seem to be sane, they're like in control of their actions, but their entire they're like a husk basically. Similarly, we see this come up in one of Canis' support, which we haven't done as SSS episode yet, but I believe I think we saw it because it was with Pent. I think we did Pent already. So Canis' brothers, lost themselves to dark magic. They became husks. I think a similar thing happened here, although Bramimond is able to maintain a will, sort of. But their entire the way the way I don't know how to. It's hard to put into words. But they essentially take on the mannerisms and personality of the person who they are speaking to. I think down to their voice changing. If I'm not mistaken, in Fire Emblem Heroes, they actually have multiple different voice actors that they cycle between or that they overlap. I don't know. I don't know anything about Heroes, but that's what I've heard from people who play Heroes. The song that plays here is really good too when you're talking with Bramimond. It's called The 8 Generals. And I just think it's a really nice piece of music. You should go listen to it. I might put it in the episode here. I'm a little inconsistent. I go back and forth on whether I use the remastered OST when I upload these episodes, when I put music into these episodes, whether I use the remastered OST without the GBA fuzz, because sometimes it sounds better without the GBA fuzz, and then sometimes I feel like it sounds worse. It kind of depends on the song. So if you ever notice a difference in the music that I upload, that's why I kind of just go with whatever version I personally feel is better. But I like this version. I like the remastered version of this one a lot, so I'd probably put that in the episode somewhere. Okay, and so after a bit of persuading, Bramimond agrees to release the seals on the weapons. They feel that they need some convincing because they feel we put these seals on the weapons for a reason. But Athos is able to convince them that the lords are trustworthy and that they're this is very necessary to help save the world from Nurgle. And so Bramimond does it. Then Nurgle shows up. Nurgle teleports in, because he can just do that whenever he wants, I guess, and decides that he's going to take Ninian. He says, I'm gonna grab Ninian and Nils, and there's nothing you can do to stop me, and I'm gonna kill everyone. And Ninian's like, well, if I go with you, will you leave these guys alone? And he says yes. And then there's like a little bit of a fight that happens. I think Eliwood goes in to try to stop Nurgle from taking Ninian, but Nurgle does like an attack, and Athos puts up a barrier, and Eliwood is knocked unconscious and wakes up, being cared for, and Ninian's gone. Nils is still there, but Ninian's gone. Athos says something. I think like Lynn or Hector or someone is like, if Athos hadn't put up that barrier to protect you from Nurgle's attack, you would have died. And Athos is like, well, if he actually wanted to kill you, then even my barrier wouldn't have stopped you, which is like wouldn't have stopped him. Which is like, I mean, that's just silly, right? Like, maybe you could argue he was like trying to honor his promise to Ninian, which is possible, I guess. But it like the wording on that is really silly. Like, why would he just like, I don't know. This I've given up trying to make any sense of this story. It's kind of fucking gone off the deep end at this point. It's only going to get worse. So yeah. There's parts still that are left that I still like though. So I'll look forward to that. At this point, Athos gives the main lord a heaven seal, and the main lord's like, hey, I already tried this, it didn't work for me, and Athos is like, nah, bro, trust me, this time it'll work. And so they take it, and your main lord is finally able to promote. For Eliwood, this is a pretty significant deal, because it means that he has a horse now and access to lances, so he can use javelins and things like that. So it's a pretty significant upgrade for Eliwood. For Hector, it arguably makes him worse, because yes, it makes his stat caps go up. So if he was at like 20 strength or 20 defense, which is pretty feasible, now he will be able to level those stats up again. However, he doesn't gain any movement. He actually stays at 5 movement like a general. I believe he gains weaknesses to armor piercing weapons like armor slayers and hammers. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he might. And then he gains con, so much con. He's so fucking heavy, this guy, this fat ass, that the only person in the game who can carry him is, I think, Florina. And only if you don't give Florina a body ring, which, like, Florina is like a decent recipient of the body ring in my opinion, because she's really fast, but so many of her weapons weigh her down that she actually does still have some trouble doubling enemies sometimes on Hector hard mode. So if you're not doing like any kind of like LTC, if you don't mind not being able to carry Hector around, I do think that that Ninian makes a good recipient of the body ring. But if that means the trade-off for that is that you can't fucking carry around Hector in Seas maps, so whatever, I guess, doesn't matter. So this is, if anything, this might actually be a detriment for Hector. Although it'll be nice that he can actually like fight enemies again and like not feel like he's getting left behind in the stat department. And the note that this map ends on Hector mode is a conversation between Hector and Oswin. This is actually something that I mentioned last episode, because there was a conversation between Hector and Oswin in that as well, I think. And I raised some questions of like, is Oswin lying here? Is this where he is, like, does he already know that Uther's dead? And I also raised the question of, if Hector knew the truth, would he stay with Eliwood, or would he go back to be with Uther? And it turns out that I was asking those questions just a little bit too early, because we find out the answer to both of them right now. I don't think it's explicitly said, but it is very, 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 very obvious that this is the moment where Oswin knows for sure that Uther is either already dead or basically like on death's door and is not going to last very much longer. And he chooses to hide that from Hector. And Hector looks like almost as if he was answering my exact question. He looks at Oswin and says, "Listen, if I find out that anything is happening to my brother, I am leaving to go be alongside him. I would feel bad. I don't want to abandon Eliwood, but I need to be there for my brother and for Ostia." And Hector says, "Yeah, well, don't worry about it. He's fine. There's no problem." And this is a really good moment for the both of them. I really like Oswin. And I really like Hector. this is the moment where Oswin becomes Heisenberg or whatever the fuck, I don't know. But it's a fun moment. It's a cool moment for both of their characters that I really enjoyed. Okay, that's it for Cog of Destiny. We're going on an hour now. By my time, although that's going to be trimmed down significantly. But yeah, I mean it's one of the more infamous chapters in not just the game but in the entire series. Those Valkyries are the stuff of nightmares. You know, any FE7 player will tell you about those fucking Valkyries. They're so goddamn obnoxious. But thankfully, we're mostly over the hump now. There's a couple chapters left that I still don't like very much, but I don't think any of them... I haven't really seen Victory or Death too much yet. I don't remember too much about Victory or Death, I should say, but I do remember it being pretty tricky. But it's not... I don't remember it being quite as bad as Cog of Destiny, so we'll see. Okay, next up, we're on to Chapter 28... Eliwood. Yes, we're moving backwards because now we're on Eliwood mode where the numbering's different, which is called Valorous Roland. So this is the chapter that, basically, I mentioned this already, but this is the chapter that I needed to play all of Eliwood mode to get to, because this is an Eliwood mode exclusive map. This map is not on Hector mode, and I wanted to stick to my policy of playing every single map in the series, so by that logic, I needed to play this one. We're gonna see how that changes, because, you know, later games have, like, the DLC maps or whatever that are, you know, that might end up making me question this philosophy, but at least in terms of the games that don't have DLC, I mean, I've already, if you want to really be super hyper, picky about, you know, playing every map, I didn't do the FE6 trial maps, but to be fair, most of them don't unlock until you've played the game like 60 times. Maybe I'll go back and do like a bonus episode on all like the trial maps and bonus map content in the series or whatever. I don't know, who knows, we'll see. Anyway, so the concept of this map, there's an Eliwood mode equivalent and a Hector mode equivalent. Both of them are pretty short, both of them are pretty easy. I don't have much to say about either of them, so hopefully we can get through them pretty quickly. And essentially, Bramamon has broken the seals on the legendary weapons, so now Eliwood goes to get his, and Hector goes to get his. It's not at exactly the same time. I think they space it out a little bit. I think in fiction, Hector's happens first, because I believe at the end of Hector's map, they say, all right, now let's go get yours, Eliwood. Yeah, actually, that does make sense for reasons we're going to see later. At the beginning of this map, though, and before we actually get into the gameplay itself, we do an enemy POV between with Nurgle as he has Ninian in his clutches, and they're kind of going back and forth. She kind of breaks free of his control a little bit, and transforms into... We don't see it yet, but in case it isn't incredibly obvious at this point, Ninian is a dragon. And she transforms into her dragon form. All we see is a silhouette of the dragon as it like looms over Nurgle. And Ninian in dragon form runs off from the Dragon's Gate, I guess. I'm pretty sure that's where they are. And goes all the way back to Lycia, which is a little silly. But I guess it gives them time to do these maps. So Valorous Roland takes place in the FE6 Chapter 8X cave, where we got Durandal in the first game, because Eliwood's the titular Blazing Blade, is the Durandal, and that's the weapon that Eliwood gets to use. Now, this map doesn't actually look very much like 8X. It's pretty drastically different. Let me take a look at because I remember what 8X looks like. Let me take a look at Valorous Roland again. Yeah, I mean, the shrine where Durandal is in this game it doesn't even look similar to the one in FE6, and like the wall layouts are completely different. So like this is not one of those instances of what I mentioned last time where Cog of Destiny is just kind of FE6 Chapter 21 like shifted down into the right. This is like an entirely different map, but it uses the same aesthetics. It has the same gimmick, which is the lava tiles. Everybody loves lava tiles. Woohoo! If you don't remember the lava tiles, if you're standing on them, I don't even know if they proc 100% of the time, but at least sometimes, if you're standing on them, you will just take 10 damage. Which is like a minor inconvenience at best, especially like in FE6. That actually is pretty significant because you get this map so early that most characters don't have very much HP, but now we're at the point where like most of your characters are going to have like 20 or going to have like HP in the 30s and 40s. So like 10 HP it's like nothing, but whatever, I guess. The way this map is laid out is actually pretty cool. You have Eliwood in the center. You're only allowed to bring 5 characters, including Eliwood. It's only 4 characters that aren't Eliwood. Eliwood is in the center, and he's sort of cut off from the others. And then you have 2 on the left and 2 on the right that have like their own paths that they have to take upwards. And that's pretty cool. The enemies are so easy that it's not even remotely challenging. I think I prefer this approach though, because having characters, I mean, they would have needed to make the enemies really weak, right? Because if Eliwood wasn't strong enough at this point, if you just hadn't trained Eliwood at all, and Eliwood was super weak, then you wouldn't be able to really like play this map very well. I think it would still technically be possible, because you can have your guys go up. Actually, I wonder if you could get a flyer to just go help Eliwood. That could work too. You get a flyer in there, probably. You can have your guys go up the sides and then go back down to like kill all the enemies to clear a path for Eliwood. But it would be pretty tedious and it would take a while. Once you do make it up to the top, though, there is actually one enemy on this map that is extremely dangerous, and that is the boss. So a couple things about this boss. First of all, he is extremely strong. I don't remember his name. I remember the boss of the Hector mode map because it's really funny for reasons that I'll explain later. It's Jorg. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Georg. He's fucking cracked. Let me see his stats on. Oh, it does not even it doesn't even matter whether you're on hard mode or not. He has 27 strength. He's a berserker, so he has high crit, and he has a tomahawk, which is a pretty high might weapon, and S-rank axes, which I don't know if that applies to the enemy as well, but your characters get crit bonuses for being S-rank, so that's even higher. He actually killed Marcus. I did lose Marcus to this guy here. I ended up not resetting because this is like I didn't continue on Eliwood mode past this map, so. But yeah, so he has a tomahawk, he moves, and he's like extremely strong, and took out like 2/3 of Marcus's health in one attack, which is pretty brutal. Now you might think, oh, what are you supposed to do against this guy? Well, the truth is that you don't actually need to kill him. At least on normal mode, maybe on hard mode as well, I'm not sure, but on normal mode at the very least, he moves. He moves off of the quote unquote throne equivalent, which is how he killed Marcus. Because I didn't realize he was going to move. And then as long as you just have Eliwood stand on his space, then you win. Even if you don't actually kill the boss, he does drop his tomahawk, which is a pretty good weapon. So you might want to try to kill him for that, but it's not really it's not super important. So yeah, really easy map. I like the concept. I think if the boss didn't move and you weren't able to just or if it was a kill boss map even, and he was able to move, I think that could have been super cool. And if the enemies were a little bit tougher, which would have made things harder for Eliwood. But again, I think if you have a good flyer, which you should at this point, you can have someone fly in to help Eliwood. I think that would be pretty cool. I think a few minor tweaks actually would have made this map super interesting. One of the better ones in the game, but as it stands, it's just kind of like really short and boring. Because most of the enemies are so weak, and the clear objective is really easy. So some missed potential there. I really do think this could have been cool. At the end of this map, there is a cutscene in which Eliwood. Actually, no, it's not really Eliwood. Athos speaks to Roland, the ghost of Roland. Who was kind of there. Unclear why Roland was there. Maybe some sort of watching over the Durandal. But then after they take the Durandal, his spirit sort of fades away. So it's why? I don't know. I'm not gonna try to parse that. But Eliwood was able to see him. I wish Eliwood had a moment to talk to him. That would have been cool. But no, unfortunately, that doesn't happen. It's all Athos. Eliwood does see Roland, though, and comments on him. It's kind of implied that this sword is what keeps him tethered to the earth in that way, which is kind of neat. And him giving it over to Eliwood is, or to Athos, I guess, again, because he's not actually talking to Eliwood here. Him giving it over to Athos is sort of what makes it so that his spirit can't stay in this world any longer. But they don't actually even talk about. I'm looking at the script now. They don't even actually talk about Roland at all. After he disappears. So it's a little bit of a missed opportunity, I think. It seems to be the theme of this chapter, really, is just missed opportunities, because I feel like they could have done so much more on the Eliwood version of this map. And they do a little bit better on the Hector mode version of this map, which we'll talk about now. There is more to this chapter, but it overlaps between both the Eliwood mode and Hector mode versions. So we'll save that for the end. So we're going to move on to chapter 30, Hector, I believe, which is called the Berserker. So Hector's weapon of choice is going to be the Axe Armads, which is hidden away on a cave in the Western Isles, if you remember, from FE6. And this is pretty similar. Again, I don't think it actually is the same like map layout. Maybe this one feels a little bit more similar to the Eliwood mode equivalent to its FE6 counterpart. It's just kind of like you're approaching the throne from the other direction. There's some chests, there's poison gas fumes that shoot out and potentially poison you. You're actually, on Hector hard mode, you're only allowed to take one other person with you. So you could make that like a good combat unit if you're worried about Hector taking damage. There's a lot of magical enemies on this map, so you might want to take someone that has like decent res and can help Hector fight off against the fucking the guys, the mages. My recommendation would be someone who's like a sword master or like Florina, probably. I mean, Florina is just a good recommendation no matter what. But you could also take a thief. I think like maybe you're supposed to bring Matthew, because it feels very fitting. Like the beginning of Hector mode is Hector and Matthew together by themselves on a map. So I think that this is a fitting. And there's chests everywhere, like I said, so bringing a thief makes sense. There are ways to get into the chests without thieves. There's a stealable speed wing, I think it's a speed wing. And so bringing a thief makes sense from that sense. But yeah, so I brought Legalt, and then I ended up not stealing the speed wing, and also didn't make it in time to get the item from the chest that I really wanted, which was the wolf bale. Because there are thieves in this map that will go for the chests before you and get to them basically more quickly than you can stop them, unless you have someone that has higher than 6 movement, which I didn't. So unfortunately, I kind of just fucked up for no reason. I could have I ended up having to restart a couple times and then still didn't really get what I wanted. So this map was kind of just one big L on my part, but it was still alright. It's not like a bad map or anything. The actual gameplay part of this map is pretty whatever. You just kind of move through the cave. It's almost identical to FE6 chapter 12X, except probably less fun, if anything, it was already not a great map. There's no fog of war in this one though, which I appreciate. But like, it's just kind of slow. There's less to do. There's less going on. There's like barely, like you can consider the thieves a side objective, and the chest a side objective if you really want to. But like they were just kind of frustrating for me. I definitely could have planned better, so that's not really the map's fault. But it's just like I don't know. I didn't feel like this map was all that interesting. It wasn't like hard. The boss was pretty tricky, I will say, and I do remember this boss's name because my brain is completely rotted out. And any similarities to Drakengard are like make me laugh, like giggle uncontrollably for no reason. But the boss's name is Kame, and he's pretty tough. I believe he also has a tomahawk, and he doesn't move from his throne, so you can't just like get on there and steal his spot and take it. You have to kill him. And I was playing pretty dangerously here. I ended up getting lucky a couple times. If I had died, then I would have had to redo the map. I reset a couple times, like really early, because I realized I was kind of getting fucked up by the thieves a little bit. But I would have probably planned substantially better than I did. So that was like, I kind of was flying by the seat of my pants and I made it through. So like, I guess that's good. Once you beat Kame, you can take a spot on his throne. Again, it's not actually a throne, but it's like a spot that you have to occupy. It's basically C's. And similarly to Eliwood, there's a moment here where Durbin, I think his name is Durbin. Yes, Durbin. he appears as an apparition similarly to how Roland did. And he's characterized pretty interestingly. First of all, I like that he's actually allowed to talk to Hector instead of Athos being there to do the talking. He's allowed to have a conversation with Hector. And he seems like really battle hungry, really, kind of bent on power and conquest in an interesting way. And then he says, "Hey, I want you." He's like, "Shut the fuck up! I don't care about any of that. I just want your cool axe, dude. I wanted that cool, sick, powerful axe." And in a moment of lucidity, Durbin's like, "Well, if you want my axe, then be warned that you, if you want the power of this axe, be warned that if you take a hold of this axe, you won't die comfortably in a bed. You're going to die on the battlefield." And a lot of people interpret this as a literal curse that Armads has on it. And to be fair, I do think that is the intended read. I do think that this is intentionally a nod to how Hector dies in FE6, because we know how Hector dies in FE6. He dies in battle. And I think this is supposed to be like, hey, didn't you ever wonder about why Hector died in battle in FE6? And the answer is no, we didn't. This did not need to happen in any way. So I will say, like, I don't think that is an incorrect interpretation just based on what we know about this game and about, how the devs like to shove references to FE6 in there. However, reading the actual text, it does actually feel more like metaphorical. It feels more like Durbin is saying, if you are the type of person that wants power, even if it's for good reasons, even if it's to protect, whatever you're protecting, people who desire power will inevitably, never be able to rest peacefully. That's more what it seems like to me, but I could be wrong. And I mean, like, clearly, Hector was not exactly like a battle-hungry, monster for the rest of his life. But he did die on the battlefield. So I do think it makes sense for it to be like an actual curse. But I think my interpretation is cooler and better, so I'm going to go with that one instead. Cool, thanks. Okay, and then, Hector's like, all right, Eliwood, time to go get your cool sword or whatever. And then that's when the valorous Roland happens in fiction. So after Eliwood gets his cool sword, they leave the cave. And who should show up right at that moment than Ninian? Ninian in her dragon form, but of course, obviously, they don't know that she's a dragon somehow. They haven't figured that out yet. But they don't know that it's her. And Eliwood's like, oh, cool, it's a dragon. Time to test out my cool new sword. That's not exactly what happens. The dialogue makes, and like especially like the post battle dialogue, make it pretty clear that like to an extent, the weapon sort of like happened on its own. But definitely, certainly, Eliwood wasn't really fighting against it. I think it makes most sense for it to be like a combination of both. Like, it's kind of like an automatic anti-dragon system that it's got going on, but also Eliwood probably just assumed, like, I think part of it was like Eliwood was really excited to try out his new sword. I mean, that's me. Maybe that's like character assassination. Maybe it's slander. Maybe my Eliwood fans out there are like, oh no, he would never do such a thing. But I think that's a very human, believably human emotion, right? Like, I just got this sword to beat Nurgle. He's trying to summon dragons. Oh look, there's a dragon. Time to test out my cool new sword. So he attacks Ninian and kills her in basically one hit. And then Nurgle shows up and tells him, hey, that was Ninian that you just killed, dumbass. And there's like a really, I mean, like, I'm joking around a little bit, but I do think that she's that this is like a genuinely really touching scene for the most part. Because once Eliwood realizes that it's Ninian, he grieves for her. She transforms back into her human form. There's like slightly different dialogue here if they had an ace support, because their ace support is explicitly romantic. And yeah, it is pretty sad overall. I do think this is like a pretty well handled death scene for the most part. Unfortunately, it cannot be all good because we do have Nurgle here, and Nurgle, when he first shows up, says, I believe his exact quote is, Ninian proved useless. I have come for a replacement, obviously referring to Nils. And so, after Ninian like does her thing and she dies and they go back and forth a little bit, he goes to grab Nils, and Athos fights him, and handily, like, defeats him, basically. I mean, like, they exchange blows, and Nurgle does a lot more damage to Athos than he does than Athos does to Nurgle. Even with, now that Athos is actually using Forblaze, which is his legendary weapon. So overall, it seems like Nurgle is just way too powerful to be defeated here. And yet, Nurgle just leaves after this without taking Nils. He says later that he was injured a little bit from this, which is why he can't summon dragons immediately. But this whole thing doesn't make any fucking sense, man. Like, does he need Nils or does he not need Nils? I don't know. It's very confusing to me. I'm genuinely, because it's later on he says stuff that implies that he doesn't need Nils anymore. Then why did he come here? I don't get it, man. This doesn't make any sense. Maybe I'm stupid. There's a really strong possibility that I'm just stupid and that I don't and I'm just, like, not reading and interpreting the story correctly. I'm open to that possibility. I just don't get it. I feel like this is just kind of a mess, and it's not very well handled. I think Nurgle is a super interesting villain in some ways, but he's just, like, his motivations and his actions don't make a lot of sense, because they simultaneously want. I mean, this is the problem you have with, like, a lot of like really powerful villains in stories, is that if you want to make them super powerful, then you have to come up with a reason why they can't or won't just kill everyone immediately. Like, as it stands right now, apparently, based on what we're seeing, Nurgle could just kill everyone in this room immediately, and there would be no problem. Or I guess they're not in a room, they're outside, but you know what I mean. Like, he could kill everyone in Eliwood's group, including Athos, with no chance of them beating him. And he just doesn't for some reason. And there's, like, he could grab Nils right now and no one could do anything to stop him, but he just doesn't for some reason. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Anyway, Nurgle does say some stuff about basically he suggests that he knows Athos, which I think is the first time that this idea is brought up. I mean, Athos seems to know a little bit more about Nurgle than maybe he should, but I don't think it's ever been explicitly said that they, like, used to know each other. And here Nurgle is implying it pretty heavily, which is going to be relevant in the next chapter. And then Nurgle leaves. And then Ninian's still, like, barely clinging on, basically. I think my favorite part of all this, though, is when Nils shows up. And like, he has a fucking breakdown at Ninian dying as well, like, much more so than anybody else, which makes sense. Poor Nils, man. He's really going through it. And then I have a note here because there's, like, a lot of really cool CGs that they use in this. I really like the Nurgle, the CG of, like, Nurgle looming over Eliwood and like him holding Ninian in his arms, and Nurgle is just, like, looming over them both. It's like a really cool imagery, despite the fact that I don't, despite the fact that I don't actually like Nurgle that much. I think it's cool. And that is the very dour note that this chapter ends on, both 28 and 30. That's so weird to say. You guys know what I mean, though. 28 Eliwood, 30 Hector. This is essentially, the story is reaching its climax at this point. We're very close to the end here. Only a few chapters left to go. The next one is chapter 31, which is called Sands of Time. Now that they have the legendary weapons, I think Athos stored them away somewhere. I think especially after what happened with Eliwood, Eliwood realized that maybe these things are a little bit dangerous because he didn't feel like he was fully in control of his own body. So Athos, like, took them and is gonna, like, bring them back later. And they return to Ostia to kind of, like, regroup and plan their next move. Uther is not here, and there's some comments made about that. Hector's like, hey, what's going on? And Oswin has to lie again and says, yeah, he's like, I think he says he's in Etruria, but yeah, it's an obvious lie. And everyone's doing a pretty good job of keeping it under wraps. Not a single person spills the beans, despite there being a lot of, like, Ostian people here. Everybody's doing a good job keeping it a secret from Hector, which must feel pretty bad for Hector later, but, well, whatever. Athos decides to discuss his backstory with Nurgle here in this moment. I think hearing Nurgle talk about it got Athos to decide that maybe it's time to just put it all out there in the open. So essentially, Athos and Nurgle used to be friends. They met each other traveling through the desert, and they both had like really similar interests and were similar in a lot of ways, so they became really good friends. They found Arcadia, which is a little bit inconsistent with what we see in FE6. I believe in FE6 they said that Athos founded Arcadia, like he was the one who established the city. And here it says that the Arcadia was already there. Although to be fair, like it's not super inconsistent with what we see in 6, because he does say like, yes, it was already there, but he like helped them build it into the city that it would eventually become. He created an oasis there, for example, and like did a couple other things. I think he set up the sandstorms so that people couldn't like stumble across it. So he didn't technically start the village, like he didn't open it up for business and invite people to come, but he did like kind of help mold it into the city that we know it as in FE6, which makes sense, especially over the course of hundreds of years. I could very easily see that becoming they kind of just gets conflated in the myth of like the history of the founding of Arcadia. I think that's actually very realistic. So that part doesn't bother me as much. And they started to like learn all like the dragons and the people who lived in Arcadia were like, they're really chill and they're like super, super helpful. And they learned a lot from them. One of the things that Nurgle learned how to do was how to manipulate life energy or quintessence. And he started to get really invested in this, started killing small animals, and then eventually he actually ended up killing a few humans to use their quintessence, and that was the point where they decided that they couldn't he couldn't be allowed to stay in Arcadia, so they chased them off. I do wish they had talked a little bit more about what had actually happened with Nurgle. I mean, the backstory as we know it is so like scattered and split up across the game that it's hard to parse even if you know the whole thing. But essentially what we do know happened with Nurgle is that he had children with one of the dragons, presumably in Arcadia, named Einir. And I think it's Einir. Is it Einir? Or Ainir? Something like that. And he ended up having 2 children who are Ninian and Nils. I don't believe no one involved knows that Ninian and Nils are his children. I mean, obviously Nurgle knew at one point, but after dabbling so much in dark magic, he forgot about all of that. So, that's kind of the tragedy of his character, is that he's doing all this, and he's hurting his children without even realizing that, what he's doing it for, et cetera, et cetera. You guys know the deal. But there's not really a whole lot of explanation given as to why he would want to start messing around with quintessence in the first place. There's not really like he wants power. Like his whole character arc is that he wanted power to get his children, to like open the Dragon's Gate and get his children back. But before he had the children, why would he want power? Like, why would he care about power? I don't know. It doesn't. Wait, no, does that? Maybe, hold on. Maybe, and I'm thinking about it now. Maybe I had it backwards, right? Maybe Nurgle's been alive since the Scouring, and Ninian and Nils have also been alive since the Scouring, and maybe he wanted power maybe this is where he started getting the idea that he could use power to open the Dragon's Gate to get them back. Maybe Ninian and Nils were already on the other side of the Dragon's Gate when this happened. That could make sense. And then this is where his descent into madness started. Yeah, I mean that's believable to me. Sure. That I don't know if there's anything in the game that contradicts that. I don't remember. If anyone, I like that interpretation better though. I just kind of always assumed that he met Einir in Arcadia, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. I mean, I don't know how quickly dragons age. I feel like if Ninian and Nils were 1,000 years old, they would certainly look older than they do. Especially Nils. Nils is like a literal like child in appearance still, whereas Ninian is like more like a young adult. That's interesting. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are, because I never really considered that interpretation before, but it does. I think I like it better. It doesn't make sense in some ways still, but I do like it better for Nurgle's character. So I think I'm gonna start thinking that way. I think that makes more sense. Maybe that's the way. Maybe everybody else already thought that, and I'm the one who's behind here. But no, okay. Well, we'll see. Maybe if anyone else feels differently or feels the same, let me know. And then that's essentially the gist of Nurgle and Athos' backstory. I think he gets cut off in the middle of the story. And then like he finishes it at the end of the map, but it's like not anything substantial other than what I've already said. So the map starts because so a bunch of morphs show up and they're like, how did they get in? You know, this castle's supposed to be impregnable. He just started like teleporting them inside the castle already, which is so funny. Like, if he can be that precise with his teleportation of dozens upon dozens upon dozens of fucking morphs, then like I don't know how this fight isn't already over. Like, why didn't he just teleport them in the throne room, or like into Hector's bedroom while he's asleep? Like, you know, like what the fuck? Like, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. But you know, again, I've said that many times. I think you guys get the gist of why the story doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So there are a couple cool things about this chapter. There's some chests here. Some of them have good items. I think they all actually have good items. Let me double check the contents of the chests real quick before I lead anybody on. Okay, so yes, there is a dragon shield. There is a white gem, and there is a body ring. So all pretty good items, all things considered, I would say. There is also a secret shop. This secret shop is weird because in order to access it, you need warp. It is outside of the castle in an area that you can only access by warping to it, which is cool. I always like when secret shops do that. I think it's a neat idea. The problem is that the actual items in the secret shop are ass. It's just promotion items. Let me just double check. Secret, yeah, it's a Hero Crest, Night Crest, Elysian Whip, Orion's Bolt, and Guiding Ring. So to use a fucking a warp staff use on that would be weird. They could have put like stat boosters in there. I don't think that they invented non-infinite secret shops until like FE11. Well, I guess like FE10, but FE10 has different secret shops. Anyway, like I get why they wouldn't want to do but like it was a cool idea, all right? You know, I think it's neat. I think it would have been a cool idea to, especially right before battle preparations, because then it would have been, you know, you could safely buy a bunch here and then like get more money to make sure that you're stocked up on supplies for battle preparations as well. So I think that would have been neat, but unfortunately it was not to be. It's just promotion items that if you still have unpromoted units on your team at this point, like what are you even doing, man? What's going on? Maybe if you're Iron Manning, but otherwise I really don't know how that could possibly be the case. The actual layout of this map is pretty cool. There's a shitload of Hector hard mode. On Hector hard mode. There's a shitload of knights. There's also shamans. And snipers and archers. There's quite a few reinforcements that you can stop by killing Denning. Hold on, where's the reinforcements? Enemy data. Hector hard. Reinforcements. Yeah. So there's quite a few reinforcements that show up. But if you take out Denning, then it's not really an issue. This is a defend map. You have to survive, I don't know how many turns. I think it's like 15. 11. Okay, I was way off. What the fuck? I'm really bad at guessing how many defend maps these how many turns these defend maps last for. But the throne is super easy to protect. Even if you don't leave anybody behind to defend it, like you can pretty easily just like kill all the enemies before they even have a chance to make it close to the throne. The main thing that you have to worry about is like if you put someone down and deal with all the armor knights, Denning is pretty easy to take out. He's not super strong. But I have had playthroughs where my guy, like I don't feel like super equipped to take on all of these druids or all these armor knights or whatever. Depending on the teams you're using, it might not be you might not fare too well against them. And it is possible for you to just get overwhelmed by numbers. Some of the enemies are pretty strong. There are status staves here that you have to be careful of. There's a berserk staff, a sleep staff. I think there might even be more than one of each. So I have had playthroughs that have gone much more poorly for me, where I end up getting pushed back into the throne room and have to actually play it like a defense map. That's pretty rare though. It's pretty easy to just like kill all the armor knights and there's some like they have some there's like killer axes that you got to be careful of. Like they're kind of jacked. I think I just have a really strong team this time around. It is very feasible for you to end up in a situation though where some of your guys are getting their shit pushed in and you have to fall back. And the spot where some of your units start is not actually very easy to retreat from, because there's no way to get back out of the area where they start. You need to like go closer to the enemies before you can turn a corner and round back. I do like the layout of the map. I think that the hallways are pretty distinctive to fight in. I like the way that it interacts with the archers, where they can shoot you through the walls. There's some choke points, but there's not so many that it becomes like a snooze fest. Yeah, I really like the layout of this map, and I had a better time here than I remembered having in previous playthroughs. So for what that's worth, but I have struggled with this map in the past. I know that much for a fact. Denning is really cool. Denning is actually maybe my favorite boss in the game, because he is a morph whose explicit purpose is to say the exact phrase, "This is a message from Lord Nurgle. I await you on the Dread Isle." And he just repeats that over and over and over again. He says it at the beginning of the map. He says it in his battle dialogue as he's dying and collapsing on the ground. He continues to say it until he can't speak anymore. It's genuinely really creepy. And I like this idea that he created a whole ass guy, like a whole life, just to pass along this message. Like, what a flex. That is interesting to me. That is a cool flex that I think was super interesting. Characterization for Nurgle, more so than some of the shit we see him do, like in the past couple of chapters anyway. Okay. So yeah, and then you beat Denning, you survive for how many turns you need to survive for, and then the map's over. What's his face? Athos continues his backstory, but it's not. I basically already gave the gist of it. There's nothing else I really needed to add about that. The Lords decide that they're going to take the fight to Nurgle. Obviously the message from Denning was heard loud and clear, but even more so than that, they say, well, if he can just like teleport guys after us, then we're not safe no matter where we go. So we might as well just go and attack him. So they're going to head to the Dread Isle. That's their next plan. There is one last scene here in Hector mode. Oswin has been found out. Ever since they returned back to Ostia, Hector's felt like something is wrong, something's off, and he confronts Oswin about it, and Oswin, steadfast to the last, he does not give up the ghost. He keeps insisting that Uther's fine. That Uther is fine. But Hector figures it out and says, like, I know he's dead. Like, you wouldn't be like so, you wouldn't be so hesitant to tell me this if he was alive and just like recovering or like injured or something. He must be actually dead. And Oswin, eventually Oswin kind of just like gives up the lie. And they have this back and forth. Oswin explains why he did it, why Uther wanted to do it. He says to Hector, because Hector says, like, I'll never forgive you and I'll never forgive Uther. And Oswin says, you can say whatever you want, you can feel however you want about me, but you should know better than to doubt Uther's intentions. You should know that he cared about you and that he loved you and that he would never do this to you unless he had a good reason. And the reason that he gives is basically what Uther said was that I knew that if he knew about me, if he knew that I was dying or already dead, he would have to make a choice. He would have to either abandon Ostia or abandon Eliwood and Lynn and the rest of his group. And he would hate himself no matter what choice he made. He would never be able to live with himself if he abandoned either of his responsibilities. And so I'm not going to put him into a position where he has to make that choice, which I think is like such a cool. I wish we got to see Uther more. I mean, I'm sure Hector also did. But I wish we got to see more of Uther, because he seems like such a cool character. That's like a really great dynamic for the two of them to have. And like their dynamic and their relationship is built on over the course of the game, where Hector feels like a little bit of a disappointment, and he's very sensitive about that. But Uther never saw him as a disappointment. Uther only ever saw him as his brother, and like knew that his brother like was caring and loving, and would not be able to live with himself, if he shirked either of his responsibilities. And I think that says a lot to Uther's love of Hector, which I think is just great. I really think I love this whole subplot. I think it's so interesting. It's so much more interesting than the actual plot. That's it for this chapter. There is a guidance map attached to this chapter, and for a long time, I'm pretty sure this is actually like something that used to be spread as a misconception in the community. Because for the longest time, I always thought that the requirement for getting this chapter was that at least one green unit has to survive in Sands of Time, similarly to 17X, where one green unit has to survive to get the guidance chapter. Either I completely just made that up, or as I said, I think I read that somewhere. I don't know if it was on a wiki or on Reddit or what. But someone somewhere was wrong, or I was just wrong. Doesn't really matter. The point is that you get the guidance chapter no matter what. You always unlock it 100% of the time. I did test that out this time. I mean, not on purpose. I just I go out of my way to make sure I save one green unit. But then I checked here and I was like, oh, well, apparently I don't have to. So I let them all die and I still got the guidance chapter. You can say no still, so it's still a guidance chapter. But yeah, it's chapter 31X and it's called Battle Preparations. This one's weird. This one's kind of a weird note to end on. But it's a fun map. I actually really like the concept of this map. In a game where there's no world map, you cannot go to shops whenever you want. You need to make sure that you stock up on supplies during the actual maps. There's not even an in like battle preps armory like there was in FE6 normal mode, at least. So like if you run out of weapons in some random map and you don't have if you don't have a shop coming up in the next chapter, you could theoretically just soft lock yourself, I guess. It's very unlikely, but you could do it. So I like this workaround. I mean, obviously in the next game and in several later games, they would just put in a world map that you can go and buy items on whenever you want. Or at the very least, they would put in like an armory like they did in FE6. I don't know why they stopped doing that for this game. It made a lot of sense to do it in FE6. I don't know why they didn't do it here. Where you just buy weapons from the battle preps menu, just basic weapons, like iron swords, iron lances, so that you never ran out of like ways to attack your enemies. But in this game, they don't have that. So instead, they decided, before the final battle, we're going to give you 30,000 gold on top of whatever you may already have. We're going to give you a map with a whole bunch of different shops and armories with basically every type of weapon you can think of, silvers and killers and throwing weapons and, whatever you need, they got it here. I think they even have reaver weapons. And you just get 5 turns to buy whatever you want. You can deploy all your units. You can have them go shopping. You have opportunities to make room in Merlinus. It's good to go. You're good to go, and you can stock up for whatever you need for the final couple of chapters of the game. I think it's a fun idea. It's not amazing or anything. It's not fun. I guess it's not even really. It doesn't feel like it's meant to be fun. It's just kind of it's just a neat idea. Is really the best way I can describe it. There's some nice character building moments here for a lot of characters, because there's still some story going on here. Hector has multiple conversations with several of the members of his Ostia group, so Matthew and Sarah, for example, or specifically just those two. He also has a conversation with Lynn, if they have an A support. There's a few conversations here that only happen if the characters involved have their A support. I'm not going to go through every single one. I'm going to give them all one more once over and just talk about any of the ones that I thought were interesting. But you should go look them up. You can just look up the script for battle preparations on the wiki, and I think give them a good read. And I think you'll see where I'm coming from. But if there's I'm going to read through them now one more time, and if there's anything that I really want to talk about, I will. Otherwise, I'll just move on. Okay, yes. I'm only on the second one, and I'm already unpausing to talk about something. So Marcus and Hector actually have a conversation here, where Marcus gives a little history lesson. I'm just gonna read it. It's easier to just read it than it is to paraphrase. So Marcus says, Ostia's castle town is as impressive as ever, shops and items of all types imaginable. Hector responds, for generations our ancestors dedicated themselves to a sort of frugal militarism. Nobles and commoners alike shunned extravagance. Corrupt neither the body nor the mind, they cried. Since the time of Roland, this has been the dominant ideology of Ostia. Marcus says, I heard that when Lord Uther first participated in the Lycian Council as Marcus Ostia, he gave a scathing indictment of the peer system. Now I understand. His philosophy had its roots in the history of Ostia itself. That's right, yet this thinking, it threatens the lifestyles of many of our aristocrats, so some groups view my brother with enmity. I must grow wiser so that I can sit at my brother's side and aid him. Of course, my fighting skills are not yet what they should be. Which, that has a couple layers, obviously. First of all, I just think that's really good world building. But second of all, if you're playing Hector, this version of the script does show up in Hector hard mode. Hector already knows that Uther's dead, so he's hiding that here. And there's a scene where Lynn and Eliwood just look at him and don't say anything. So I think that they're both I think they've both figured it out at this point. In fact, I think some of the other conversations are about that. Let me just double check. Yeah, I think that's the only conversation that really stood out to me. But there's still some good ones in there that you should go read. Now there is one other thing that's noteworthy about this chapter, and that is that there is a recruitable character. This character's name is Carla, and she's a character that I've mentioned. I don't think I've ever mentioned her by name before, but I have definitely explained sort of what part of her deal is. So in order to recruit Carla, you need to have Bartray on your team. He needs to be deployed in this map, and he needs to be a level 5 warrior. If he's not promoted and he's not level 5 promoted, then Carla will not show up. So you need to bring Bartray to the arena, and then Carla will show up if he's at least a level 5 warrior. He can be higher, I guess. And then they will fight, and if both of them survive the fight, then Carla will join your team. And Carla is kind of interesting. She's Corell's sister. And yet, despite that, even if you deploy Corell on this map, they have no talk conversation. He cannot recruit her. There's no interactions between them whatsoever. I think they have a support together, but that's it. Do they even have a support together? I actually don't even know for a fact. But anyway, it's weird. It's weird that doesn't have more of an interaction between them. I don't really get it. The reason that Bartray can recruit her is because they have a little bit of a history together. I guess they met and fought before on the Western Isles, and there was some back and forth there. I think Bartray wanted to get revenge on her. I guess she beat him there, I think, and he wants revenge. Now, Bartray surviving the fight is easier said than done, because she's quite a bit higher level than him, and Bartray sucks ass. If you have a really good Bartray, then the other problem might be true, where Carla might be too weak to survive a fight with Bartray, because spoilers, she's really, 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 really bad. She's so bad. Holy shit, she's bad. But we'll talk about that in a minute. The way that most people are able to do it, and this is what I did as well, I believe a 0% growths level 5 promoted Bartray always survives a fight with her as long as he has a light rune, the iron rune, because the iron rune prevents critical hits, and that's the main thing that would be an issue. Real strong Carla there, one of the last recruitable characters in the game, can't even kill essentially base Bartray as long as she doesn't crit him, which is so funny. She's so fucking bad, guys. Let's talk about that, I guess. Let's talk about Carla. So she's a sword master, and her stats are bad. That's the long and short of it. She's in a bad class, and her stats are bad. I'm gonna look at her stats compared to Carla or to Corell, and I'm gonna tell you exactly where they differ. Because Corell is also pretty bad. Corell is not a very good unit. He's okay. He's serviceable. Especially for a game as easy as FE7. You can certainly make him work. Alright, base stats. So I have Corell and then Carla here. Alright. So I'm gonna read in order. It's HP, strength, skill, speed, luck, defense, res, con. So for Corell, we have HP is 31, 16 strength, 23 skill, 20 speed, 15 luck, 13 defense, 12 resistance, and 9 con. Meanwhile, Carla has 29 HP, 14 strength, 21 skill, 18 speed, 16 luck, 11 defense, 12 resistance, and 7 con. She is worse than him in basically literally everything by at least 1 to 2 points. I think almost exactly 2 points in everything. They're equal in res, so she's got that going for her. And then she beats him by exactly 1 point of luck. Is she supposed to be like a growth unit? I don't know why. Is she like an Est archetype? Is that what they're going for? Her growth rates aren't very good. Her growth rates are 60% HP, 25% strength, 45% skill, 55% speed, 40% luck, 10% defense, and 20 resistance, which is not like, that's basically the same as Corell's. So it's not like she's particularly strong in that sense either. She has like a couple more levels than Corell, so you'd think maybe that's what they were going for. Even if she had like really good growth, she would still be bad. Like, let me make that clear. But like, at least I would understand what the point of her existence is, other than, I guess she is there as a as a replacement for if your Corell dies. I guess that's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, she's hilariously bad. She's the only character in the game that I think is in contention with Nino for being the worst unit in the game. I think Nino is still worse because at least Carla can do some damage to enemies. If you deploy her in Victory or Death, or in probably not even Endgame, to be honest, probably just Victory or Death, and then the guided map after Victory or Death, I don't remember the name of, then she can probably fight some enemies and win, unlike Nino, who, if you don't train her, is just going to get killed by everybody. So overall, I think she's probably definitely better than Nino, but she's a pretty clear second worst unit in the game, in my opinion. It's not close. I'm trying to think who'd even be worse. Rebecca would maybe be the third worst, or Will, someone like that. But yeah, I don't know. Quite terrible. Okay, and then you finish your battle preparations, and they say, all right, we're going to the Western Isles. We're going to the Dread Isle. We're gonna get Fargus. He's gonna take us to the Dread Isle. We gotta get going, and that's how the chapter ends, and that's where we're gonna end the episode. Overall, a pretty interesting set of maps. I was really dreading this episode. I made no secret of that. I mentioned several times that I was really not looking forward to these chapters. In terms of which one is my favorite, I mean, it's hard to say. It's definitely not Cog of Destiny. I enjoyed Cog of Destiny more than I remembered liking Cog of Destiny, but it was still pretty bad. And what the fuck are the other options, man? I didn't hate most of these maps. Cog of Destiny was really treading the line. Is it weird to say my favorite map is battle preparations? That's of these 5. I don't think that's unreasonable, is it? It's a fun concept. The gameplay isn't anything noteworthy, but it's just a neat idea, and I like it. I enjoy it more than certainly Cog of Destiny or the 2 legendary weapon maps. The only other one that maybe I would consider is Sands of Time. Sands of Time was okay, but it was not particularly fun for me in either. That it was alright. Yeah, I can say Sands of Time. I think Sands of Time is fine. It was an alright map, but certainly not any better than Pirate Ship, which we're running out of maps here. It's probably going to be Pirate Ship, but we'll see. Who knows? Maybe I'm really going to end up liking Victory or Death more than I remember, but we shall see. Okay, that is all from me on Fire Emblem for now. I guess on Fire Emblem 7, let's look at the news. I don't think there's going to be anything significant, but I guess I might be wrong. Still just the 3 Houses umbrellas that I'm seeing. So yeah, no new Fire Emblem news that I'm aware of, at least. I've been doing a fair bit. I've actually been playing a lot of games and a lot of watching a lot of stuff that I want to talk about. First of all, I did start playing Genso Suikoden Gaiden, which I mentioned in my last Suikoden video. If you haven't listened to any of those episodes, I highly encourage you to go do so, because I talk really passionately about another series that I really like, which is the Suikoden series. I started Genso Suikoden Gaiden, and that's been going well. I'm almost done with the first game. It's extremely short. Essentially, they're visual novels, but they're pretty short. But there's 2 of them that cover one story. Basically, it's a 2-part game. So I'm done. I'm almost done with the first part. I'm probably gonna finish the first part today, actually, and then go from there. I've been playing a couple other games. I kind of bounced off Mass Effect. I started playing Mass Effect and I wasn't huge on it. So I don't know if we have any big Mass Effect fans. Sorry, but your game's kind of mid. I only played a little bit. I'm being purposefully inflammatory. I only played I played like the first mission. And I wasn't like super into it, and then the game crashed. There was something going on with the game like not having enough memory or whatever. So I was like, yeah, this is. I was already not like super loving it, and so I was like, yeah, whatever. Mass Effect 2 I've heard is pretty good, so I might just skip 1 and try to play 2 instead. Although I don't know if I know some people start with 2, so maybe it'll be fine. I have no idea. I have no interest in playing any after 2. Maybe if I hear really good things, like if I hear people say actually Mass Effect 3 is the GOAT, but I've heard mostly pretty negative things about Mass Effect 3 and the games that came after. So I'm not holding my breath. But we'll see. I might try Mass Effect 2 though. We'll see. As for anime, I've been getting further in Gundam Double Zeta. I'm about 2/3 of the way through Double Zeta right now. It's really good. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. I like Gundam in general. I think it's a pretty fun series. I'm going in release order for the series. So I'm on Double Zeta right now. Then there's going to be Char's Counterattack that I watch next, and then a few like shorter OVAs. Then the next like big series is Victory Gundam, which I've heard very good things about. So I'm gonna hop on that at some point as well. Dawn to Dawn is the first season of Dawn to Dawn's almost over. I watched the most recent episode, which is 11 out of 12 for the first season. And then that'll be wrapping up soon, so I'm excited about that. I love Dawn to Dawn; it's so good. I don't think you guys need me to tell you this. I'm pretty sure if you're plugged into anime at all right now, you're hearing about Dawn to Dawn. It's like the cult classic anime of the season. Not cult classic, everybody's talking about it. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. So you know about Dawn to Dawn already, probably. But hey, it's being talked about for a good reason. It's extremely good. And then the only other thing, I played a really short, fun game called Majo Taro. Hold on, I had my back logged up, but I went. Majo Tori is what it's called. It's like a puzzle game, kind of. Essentially, you play as a like you go through various short stories and scenarios where you have to do like a quiz game, like a trivia quiz game, like what color is Donkey Kong's tie, or who played the Gatsby in The Great Gatsby in this movie. It's mostly like common knowledge trivia stuff. I knew the answer to most of the questions, so it can't be that hard. It's a lot of video games and a lot of anime as well, and then like movies and TV shows and stuff. So like anyone who like has that interest set is probably going to be good with it. And it's just cute. It's really fun. It's very short. It's only, my playtime on Steam was like 4 hours, maybe not even. Hold on, let me check. No, wow, not even. An hour and a half was my playtime. There's more to do though. There's like achievements you can get and like multiple, like a couple different endings for certain characters that you can get. So I might go back and play more at some point, but 90 minutes for the first full playthrough is like nothing. You can do that. You could do that. I mean, you could do it in 90 minutes. You could do it in shorter than this podcast episode length. So yeah. I enjoyed it quite a bit, so you should give it a try. It's pretty fun. Okay, I think that's everything that I had to talk about. Next time, after some back-to-back SSS episodes, of course, we're going to be finishing FE7, essentially, because the next main episode is going to be chapters 32, 32X, and then both parts of Endgame. So look forward to that. We're almost done. We're almost at the end here, and then FE8 is going to be next. I'm very excited to talk about that. Keep an eye out for those SSS episodes. Keep an eye out for the next main episode, and then we're going to be doing a wrap-up, and then probably an SSS about the Lords. I'm not sure, but we'll see. Okay, that's all that I had, so I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.